Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this show of Kahani Adda. Now, from this month, we have decided to devote one such Adda, live Addas, on poetry. So every month, we'll be discussing one poet or the other. Today, as you all here, we will be discussing Faiz Ahmed Faiz. He's the first person we decided to focus on in starting what we are calling is the Poets Corner. Next month, on the 16th of July, we'll be discussing the Bengali poet Nabarun Bhattacharya and Professor Sanjay Mukhopadhyay, Professor of Film Studies at Jadavpur University, and Mr. Chitto Ghosh, who is a Bengali literary researcher, will be our guest to discuss the works of Nabarun Bhattacharya. And then in the month of August, we will take on Arun Kolatkar, as you know, who had written this famous book called Jejuri. And then in September, we discuss Dinkar, Sindhasan Khali Karo, Janta Aati Hai. So we will talk about that. Now, today we are here to take on discussing Faiz Ahmed Faiz, icon. Now, to discuss Faiz with me, and we will discuss more about Faiz's life because that's something that's very intriguing. We will take that up as we discuss. But to discuss Faiz with me, I have our guest today, Saneya. Now, let me bring Saneya in and welcome her to the show. Well, Saneya, there you are. We are live now, and thank you very much for coming to this show of Kahani Kancheti. Saneya has, she has come from you can see the stack of books behind her, which she says is almost like a family heirloom which she has been carrying. It, some of us, I believe, her parents, some are hers. And she has done her literature in DU, and now she is an associate professor teaching again in DU. Have I got that right? You're an associate professor? No.
Well, sometime in the future, thanks, Shajit. Yeah, that's wishful, but right now I'm an assistant professor.
Assistant professor. Okay, I get very confused with these. I had a guest with me, and she was doctor something. So I said, okay, so professor. She said, no. You just call me doctor so and so. I'm not a professor as yet. So I get very confused with these titulars thing. But well, she teaches in Delhi University, and interestingly, she's doing a thesis right now from Jamia, and she will tell us a little more about what the subject of thesis is. But more importantly, she's been doing a lot of studies on the language that is spoken inside the walled city of Delhi. Now, that's very interesting because I thought walled city people, speak Urdu or they speak Braj Bhasha because, there is a mixture of the Muslim culture and the Indian culture. So all mixed together. Chandni Chowk is there, Jama Masjid is there. But Saneya tells me that it's little more intriguing in than just. And by the way, she has done a lot of studying in Urdu and Persian. Now, Saneya, you will first tell us about this language of the walled city because that is intrigued me like anything. And then I am going to ask you a few questions before we go on to Faisal.
Thank you, Shajit, for that introduction. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Delhi, where I have been teaching literatures in English for more than a decade now. And I am working on, as part of my PhD thesis, on what I call Begmati Zaban, which translates as the language of women, specifically the oral language of women, which my title is Begmati Zaban, Voice of a Subculture. So this is the genderlet, which is specifically it operates in Zanana, which was the space which was hermetically sealed, and it was a space of women, where women across all age, all women of the family, including the maids and the servants and the khadimai, the mama, the ayahs, would be there, and how they would speak a language which will not be which would be free from influences of outside. So that's why that language, it operated in that sealed domain. And I'm looking at it through various tones, through tanas, tashnas, through the idioms and proverbs, because this is how the woman would speak and train and educate the younger women in the zanana. So this is before the time when women started to go to school, where they were formally educated. So I have been doing shows with the very absolutely gorgeous Fozia Dastan group, where we showcase the dialects of Delhi, and this is one such dialect, the Big Mati Zaban, that we talk of. Before we were talking about, I was talking to Shijit about this, and I just reminded him that have you ever noticed that how most of the proverbs and even idioms in Hindustani, the Urdu Hindi language that we speak, they come from kitchen, right? And did you never think that, why do they originate there? Because kitchen was absolutely in Zanana. So most of the proverbs and idioms, they are from Zanana, but now, of course, they have become standard. So that's my story of this research that I'm
Oh, that's
hoping that
great.
comes through.
Absolutely, because this language of the Janana that you just mentioned, in the I understand that in Bengali, despite the Bengali literature again being all that, a lot of the stuff, a lot of the taunts actually come from the Jananas, which has now become common language. But that's where they sort of vent the Jananas vent their feelings, from the kitchen and wherever, and that's when a lot of these have become, well, that's something that's very interesting, the language of the Janana. All right. Now, coming to the subject today, Sania, tell me, what made you get on to Urdu and Persian? I mean, was it something that was there already in the house, and um, how did you get on to that?
So I was lucky enough to be born into a family where literature was always on the table. We talked about it. There was no day where we would not even listen to literature being sung or being practiced around us. And Urdu and Persian literature was one of the major influences. And of course, later I studied English literature. And not just Urdu and Persian, I remember Sanskrit and Punjabi literature also being discussed. And as it's visible from the books behind me, you can see Amir Khusro there. I think there must be Ghalib somewhere else, and of course Kalidas. So these were the multiple influences working at home. If we were not, before we could even read, the literature, I heard it being played in my house, and people in my house would sing ghazals, they would quote nazms, so much so that even when we were having little tiffs, so instead of the tanas and trishnas, they will be quoting from literature. So it was a very adabi, it was a very literary environment at home, and that's my initiation into literature.
Lovely. You seem to have kept up the tradition, as I can see from what you're doing. But and what you're saying here, there were the Nazams, there was the Persian, the Urdu, and the Sanskrit, the Punjabi, the Kalidas. Well, Saria, you are representing the dream of that secular India. That, I think, is where I can see you, and that's what we all are aspiring to be. Well, now coming down to Faisal. Now, two things about Faisal. One is that, if you see if you go through his life, just take a quick look at his life. His father, who is a writer himself, and sends him to a madrasa, and he says that I can't go in a horse carriage. People who come to madrasas are very poor, so I'm not going. And then he gets on to an education of all sorts. He studies almost all kind of subjects, from philosophy to economics to English, and then he starts teaching. And somewhere in the whole process, he comes, and during that college years, he actually meets up with uh, and I think that's the bond connection that we were talking about. He actually meets up with M.N. Roy and Muzaffar Ahmed, Kaka Babu, and he becomes a communist. And then he marries a Britisher in 1941, Mem Saab. And she is also a member of the Communist Party of Britain. I mean, like, what is commonly called used to be called the CPGB. So, and then they all get into this whole thing. Then he joins the army. And he becomes an order of the MBE, member of the British Empire in the military segment. And that's Faiz. So, it's a very, and then he opts out. He continues to be, he's a member of the Progressive Writers Association. He writes all this while he has been writing, he has been having his students, he has been an avowed communist. and he opts for Pakistan. Of course, that he comes from that side, so that's all right. And by the way, when in 1951 session of the Communist Party of India, they had decided that they want to have a Communist Party in Pakistan because they thought that this country was a little unstable, and because being a small country, the chances of a revolution of taking over was probably better. Well, some part of it happened in East Pakistan because first it was one joint Communist Party, then so complicated as a lot of things are. So taking that little further, uh, he then joins to some extent, joins the ministry. I mean, he's in the administration, and then he's in that conspiracy case, which he's on an exile. He stays in London for a long time. He comes back to some amount of ministerial work. He becomes the associate of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. And even in 71, when this Bangladesh genocide was, or East Pakistan genocide was happening, though he was officially some kind of he had a ministerial position, he was merely writing about the fact that the war must end. Now that, I think, is this remarkable thing about Faiz. He has been everything. And then, of course, again, he's expelled, so he goes to Beirut and he spends some time over there. And from there, he gets back to Pakistan. And of course, he's nominated for the Nobel Prize. He gets the Soviet Land Award, all right. He's nominated for the Nobel Prize. And then, of course, he passes away. I think his daughter was also a part of the Pakistan ministry, because Pakistan has had too many ministries and too many leaders, but that's their kind of problem. And then he passes away. And then all this time in his living, while he lived and he wrote, Saneya, he was an icon. He was a legend. And as I started, when I was promoting this session, I had said that the Penguin Book of Socialist Verses had two poets included in that. One was Muhammad Iqbal, who incidentally taught Faiz at some point of time. He was one of his teachers. That's what I picked up from here and there. Yeah, and the other was, of course, Faiz. So there were no socialists. That list did not. It had an Indian subcontinent in terms of both these people, but nobody from India per se. But that's what it is. So what made Faiz up? I'm leading all this into you because now I am going to let you speak and let my audience hear, because I am out of Faiz now. This is all the funda that I have on Faiz. But more importantly, the another factor is that since the last 2 years, Faiz is back in currency. He is back in currency because of a lot of agitations happening across the country, and therefore everybody has been singing. And I have even heard, mind you, I have even heard a group of students hum this in the metro train, the Delhi metro. They were all humming Hum Dekhenge. So suddenly Hum Dekhenge has brought Faiz back into the picture. And the interesting part of it is that this Hum Dekhenge was actually written as a protest against the Pakistan government. It had nothing to do with any other country for that matter. But I understand his poems, his voice of protest, which is the voice of protest really, has been heard all over the world, not just in the Delhi metro or in JNU. It has been sung all over the place. And at the same time, the lines that you gave me, Ishq kiya, kuch kaam kiya, my God, that I love, at least kuch to kiya. He was a romantic. So here we have a romantic poet. Here we have a rebel poet. Here we have a poet who's been in the army, who is this, who's that. Who is Faiz? All yours.
Just to just tell you, you have done such wonderful research. I mean, I did not know half of the facts that you have mentioned, because to me, Faiz was purely a poet, and that too a poet of love. All right, the Rumani Shairi, as you have said, or the romantic, the love verses that he has written, दश्ते तन्हाई में जाने जहां लर्जा है तेरी आंखों के साए तेरे होठों के सर, the mirages of your love. And beautiful. I mean, it's the kind of poetry that you like to quote when you're writing love letters. And so Faiz for me is a poet of love. And it's only when I grew up, or when you grew up, you realize that actually his love is not only meant for Alice, because all these, even in Zindan, all the poems or the love verses that he had written, everyone would say they are for Alice, the love of his life. And in the tradition of Urdu poetry also, you write love for a mashook. There इश्क या शायरी जो हम लिखते हैं, whenever we write love poetry, there's a mashook and an ashik, the beloved and the lover. And most of the time, because Faiz was happily married with Alice, so it would always assume that he's writing for Alice. So somewhere around the line, you realize that his love is, of course, not the kind of love which is restricted to one person or which can be confined to just one person. All right. So he continues the tradition of Urdu poetry, which is great. And I think this is precisely why the Penguin Book of Social Forces had only two poets, because of the tradition that they were carrying, Iqbal and Faiz. So the tradition that he carries. But somewhere along the line, he comes and he changes it. This not only means such a huge rupture in, or a huge change in Faiz's oeuvre or in his, life or in his career, but also changes the direction of this thousands of years long, Urdu poetry. Because the love poetry was only for Mashu, or at max it could be for the God, okay, the Sufiana ish. Because in Urdu love poetry we have two kinds of love, the do ish. One is ishq majazi, which is the ishq for materialistic things, okay, for beloved or things that you see, the ishq of this world. And then there is another one which is ishq haqiqi, which is the real, or the ephemeral, sorry, the ethereal love, which is the love for God. But Faiz comes and he expands the meaning of Ishq Majazi, which is not for one woman, which is not for just one lover, but which is for every human being. And herein comes his cause of loving, everyone who is a part of this world, right? And it's not just the Mashu. He loves those who are oppressed, those who are downtrodden. And he says, he continues this. And then, in that love, he also includes the love for country. Right. So, in all the poems that he wrote in his career, in fact, there is one strong poem which is considered as a turning point. This poem is called Do Ish, or the two kind of love. And it goes on, and suddenly, in between the verse, there comes a few lines. He says, "Chaha hai isi rang mein लैलाए वतन को, चाहा है इसी रंग में लैलाए वतन को." लैलाए वतन, the Layla of my country, in the country as Layla. Okay, so here he easily juxtaposes the beloved with the country, with the nation. He does not name the nation, right? But as we know that he could not love the nation, as a land, but nation as people. And the next line goes, "तड़पा है इसी तौर से दिल इसकी लगन में." So the Lagan is not here for a particular person, but it's the country at person. Even in Zindan Nama, so Zindan Nama is the collection of poems that he wrote when he was in prison, much like the prison notebook. So Zindan means prison. So Zindan Nama, he wrote a poem called "निसार में तेरी गलियों के, निसार में तेरी गलियों के वतन की ज़मीं." And in between there comes a line, and it seems as if he's talking about a woman, but ultimately it's about his country or his watan. So he says, the line goes, "बुझा जो रोज ने जिंदा तो दिल ये समझा है कि तेरी मांग सितारों से भर गई हो." The concept of मांग सितारों से भरी, what is he simply saying? That the small hole in the wall of that cell in which he's imprisoned, when the light goes on, "बुझा जो रोज ने जिंदा." He said, "My heart knew that the country, that my beloved country, तेरी मांग सितारों से भर गई होगी." So it is this easily juxtaposition, it is this easily replacement of love for a woman, love for a country, love for people, that is seamless in Faiz. And that's why, to me, Faiz always remains a poet of love. That's why kuch ishq kiya, kuch kam. So, I mean, by his own admission in this short piece, he says that he envies that those were the other people who could do both, and I could not do any, because when I do ishq, I could not do kam. When I do kam, ishq uske aade aata raha. Right? So that's, he thinks himself unlucky that he could not do these. But to me, the best way to approach Faiz, or to understand Faiz poetry, or to be introduced to Faiz, is as a poet of love. Then, yeah.
Yeah, go on. I mean, I mean, I think I will just not come back again, because what you're saying, and with amount of knowledge you have, and you're deep into Faiz and Urdu and Persian poetry. I mean, that I can make it out. So I think I will again go away. Unless there is any major question, I'll come and pop up. But I think everybody is listening to you like I am, just spellbound. Go ahead, Sanya. Go ahead.
Okay. So if I can continue with what I was reading earlier, just
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So this is one that I told you that I had, from which we have taken the title of this of our session today. कोशिश किया कुछ काम. He begins, वो लोग बहुत खुशकिस्मत थे जो काम से आशिकी करते थे या इश्क को काम समझते थे. हम जीते जी मसरूफ रहे, कुछ इश्क किया, कुछ काम किया. काम इश्क के आड़े आता रहा और इश्क काम से उलझता रहा. फिर आखिर तंग आकर हमने दोनों को अधूरा छोड़ दिया. This is, this is spontaneous, and I think that's where lies the appeal of Faiz, that he is so quote worthy, that he carries the tradition of the Farsi Amaze, the Persianized. By the way, Faiz also was a master's in Arabic. So it's not just three or four or five languages that he knew, but he had studied the literature. So when you see or when you read his poetry, you understand that he has read and understood the best. And, that's where he has learned the craft of poetry from. So when he wrote this, it's so quote worthy, right? Even when the nazms that he had written, which are all about love, which most of them, in fact, all of them are towards written for Alice. Okay, these are the quotes that you see, and you just want to close the book from where you're reading, and you just want to take, you want to sigh and wish someone would write like that for you. So to me, Faiz is the, if I were to, if anyone would ask me that, about popularity of Faiz, I would just tell them this, that once it's very dramatic. He was meeting an European woman at the train station, and the woman said that, I want to write to you, and at that precise moment the train started to move, and he could not give her the address. So he said that, just write Faiz Ahmed Faiz and post it to my country, and I will get it. And this actually happened. He got the letter, and they say that the precise reason for this was that every person in the postal department knew about Faiz. And why was that? Because when the whole department was on strike, Faiz has actually written a song in their support. It's as if, he has given them their anthem, and it became hugely popular. And it's not just, the postmen or the workers, because he was part of ILO when he went to Geneva. He was also, I think, vice president of the trade union federation of his country. So that's, that's where his popularity. And I think that it's very rare that a poet is as, critically successful as he's popular. It's a very rare chance. Hardly any poet that we see, maybe Shakespeare was a playwright, was one such, who is extremely popular. He, like, masses are eating from his hand. But critically also, there is no flaw in him. His poetry is flawless. So Faiz was one. In fact, it is said that, just like Pablo Neruda, people would carry his love songs in their backpacks. So soldiers would carry that. Faiz was like that for readers of Urdu. They would carry Faiz in their backpacks. Now I see many of my young students, they carry Faiz in their phones. They read, they quote him. And whether it's out of, when they want to quote love poetry, or when they want to quote a poetry of resistance, or sometimes, even mean words. So there's, when Faiz talks about desperation, when Faiz talks about dejection, when Faiz talks about losing hope. In all his poems, you see that there's always a consolation that the time shall come where people will get justice, where people will love each other, where there'll be equality, where there'll be harmony, where there'll be an end to oppression, right? So that's the consolation, or that's the note on which most of his poems end. Even when he begins with, even when he says that "Lambi hai gham ki shaam, magar shaam hi to hai," right? That the time that we are going through, of course, it's difficult, right? we tend to give up hope. But please understand that it's only a time. So for someone who has understood history, someone who had seen how um, regimes change, someone who has seen how history works, how you know it sooner or later it always ends. So it's with that mind that you read Faiz. You realize that he's not a poet of a generation, of an era, or of a particular language, or of a particular country. Faiz is Faiz. Not even Faiz up, he's just Faiz. I've seen many students or learn the language by reading Faiz. Many students, and Faiz is someone who is very easy to sing on a guitar. So students sing Faiz, his love poetry, and of course his poetry of resistance. Another thing that you have mentioned about the how right, I mean, shortly before he passed away, he got the news that he was considered, or he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. But few of the prizes that he got in his life, one was the Lenin Peace Award, which was huge, right? And at the acceptance speech there, he ended that speech with, once again, a couplet from the great Persian poet Hafiz Shirazi. And as and I'm immensely happy that once again he talks of love. People want him to quote for revolution, or people want him to quote out of of strength, but he quoted something which tells you about the omnipresence of love, because love, as I told you, is the central emotion in all of his poetry. So he quoted this Persian couplet, which goes, "Khalal pazir buad bina ke mi bini, खलल पजीर बुवद हर बिना के मी बीनी बजुज बिनाए मोहब्बत के खाली अस खलल अस्त बजुज बिनाए मोहब्बत के खाली az khalal अस्त," which means that I have traveled far and wide, and whatever I saw, every route, every foundation, every platform that I saw, it had a khalal, or it had some disturbance. Okay, it was not complete. It had a khalal, or some disturbance. Except the foundation, or the root, or the cause of love. It was the only foundation where there was no disturbance, which was free from any flaw. Khali as khalal as. Without, it was free. Khali, it was free from khalal. So, to when a poet says that, you know that this is the bina, or this is the foundation from which all his poetry is emanated. So that's why Faiz as a poet of love. That's why people often, whether protesting or in love, because I think when you protest, you also are in love for a particular idea. They quote Faiz.
I think that's a very wonderful point that you made, that even when you're quoting in protest, you're talking about something that you love. And because that thing is not available, you're protesting. But tell me also this, like I was saying that you have, my God, this is actually amazing. आपने तो बिल्कुल ये फैज को, we use a word in Bengali. I can't. I'll use it, but I can't explain it to you right now. It's called gule khawa. Gule khawa means ये वो पानी में एकदम मतलब mix करके गुला के पी जाना. तो आपने तो एकदम ये फैज साहब की सब एकदम गुले मतलब mixed it up and all drank it down. Amazing. Yeah, what knowledge. And I'm sure this must also be coming. Your parents must be also into fairs at some point of time.
No, I mean, they were in literature throughout their lives. I've
Literature
never
as such.
about literature.
But talking about the time that when I can roughly presume that when your parents were discussing literature, this must have been the 60s, 70s, 80s, Sanya, around that point of time. I mean, I'm doing a bit of a guesswork. And that point of time, there were again a lot of things were happening around in the entire world. I mean, there was this the Arab-Israel crisis happening in India. We had the emergency 71. We had the genocide in East Pakistan. Then the growth birth of Bangladesh. We went to war. I mean, that it was a very disturbed kind of a situation. And when these situations do get disturbed, when the world peace is at stake, and that is the time these fairs of the world come and really you start getting into their you look for them. You actually look forward to them because you need them for support for your romance. But it is also true that Faiz has been his poems have also signified rebellion. But in fact, while I think that Hum Dekhenge is well, it's got its own value, but it's still not a poem of rebelling. I mean, Tagore has similar poems which are not, which you can, which inspires you. The very words that and the following words. But then there have been a lot of other of his his rebellious nature, his rebellious poems. Not just Hum Dekhenge. I'm sure there are, and as I said, they have been recited and worldwide in different protest. Am I right, Sania, on that?
So yeah, so Hum Dekhenge definitely is an anthem because of the jurrat, as we call it. It has the kind of the daring that it has, and that's why. And as I said, it's so quotable. It's so easy to say that, right? And it has a rhythm which lends itself beautifully to any musical instrument that it accompanies. And many people have actually, many singers have formed their careers by singing this. In fact, okay, so this is a bit of trivia that I was told, when I had gone on a project to UP. So in Uttar Pradesh, you have this board which promotes sugarcane seed and development, right? Just hold, stay with me on this one. So they have this board which which wants to promote the cooperatives of peasants working in sugar. I mean, the sugarcane farmers, right? So that board had actually gone to a film producer, Muzaffar Ali, and had asked him to make a movie which will promote sugarcane cooperatives among the farmers. Huh. So that UP Sugarcane Seed and Development Board asked Muzaffar Ali to make a movie, and Muzaffar Ali made a movie. And because Muzaffar Ali at that point of time in his life, he was focusing on the Awadh. So he had made a trilogy of movies focusing on Awadh. Gamini, on Gaman, no, Gamini was one. One was, of course, Umrao Janada, which later became the most successful and the most popular Muzaffar Ali movie ever. So the third movie of this trilogy was this movie called Agman. It came out before I was even born. It's early 80s. I think either 81 or 82. It was, by the way, considered as the debut movie of Anupam Kher. And it's Suresh Oberoi, Saeed Jaffrey, and all these people. Uh, it's very difficult to get a CD of this, but I had a VCD from Moza there. And in this movie, the story was written by Asghar Bajawan, and all the lyrics were by Faiz. And this movie is about farmers, asking for their rights. This movie is about people who work really hard. Okay, the wretched of the world, the oppressed, and what other poet, which other poet would actually fit better in a movie like this, which talks of equality, which talks of fight against injustice, which talks of everyone coming together to develop a better society. So Faiz lent itself himself beautifully for such movies and such situations. And Hum Dekhenge, of course, is a part of that. And how, toward the end of that, when he says their line, in which he says, जो मैं भी हूँ और तुम भी हो, okay, जो लोग राज करेंगे, जो मैं भी हूँ और तुम भी हो. I recently saw a rendition in which the singers were transgenders, and when they say this line, "जो मैं भी हूँ और तुम भी हो," it just stuns you, right? Because this is the idea of equality, and how far you can take it, and it still rings true. So this is one such poem that you put it into a different context. But the message of equality, the message of fight against injustice, the message of daring, the message of not losing hope. Hum dekhenge, right? It's there, and that's in Faiz. And
Sanya, there must be. I'm saying that there must be some way to get a copy of this film, this third film in that Muzaffar's trilogy. Uh, uh, well,
yeah,
the first one being Kaman, Umrao Jan, and
yeah.
yeah, with this
Agman is the
and
name of the movie.
Agaman, yeah, and well, Muzaffar is actually, he and I share the same school tie. He's much my senior. Let me tell you, yeah, he's much my senior from Lamati near Lucknow, And we have also worked in the same advertising agency at some point of time. Of course, he was there before I came in. I mean, being senior, he finished his round and went on to make Gaman to start with, and then of course he was Umrao Jan. But I have been a very proud owner of one of his, that Kotwara. He had this NGO called Dwarki Rosie. But now we are discussing Muzaffar. Now let's come back to Faiz. But yeah, this is where Faiz lends himself. From a guitar, as you were saying, it's so easy to sing with his lyrics, so easy to sing with a guitar. At the same time, at the very same time, this one you talked about, the transgenders, I am what you are. I mean, this is mind blowing that where you can extend Faiz, and that's what it is. So Faiz belongs not just to any particular nation. He is not to any particular subcontinent. He belongs to the entire human race. As much as probably there are very other, and you're talking about that Lenin Peace Prize that he got, which in those days was considered a very prized thing to get a Lenin. And he was, I believe, very also very close to, or he had a friend in that famous Russian poet Yevchenko. Uh, yeah, and so because we were reading Evchenko and Vasco Popa, all that when we in our college years, but that was in the early 70s. But well, that's when all this phase was happening. And one more bond connection that it just struck me was that the man who founded, that man who was actually appointed to as a founder, whose name exists on the Communist Party of Pakistan. I forget his name, but he incidentally was also a Bengali. And he was operating from Lahore, not from Dhaka. Maybe they put him up there so that he could take care of both East Pakistan and West Pakistan. But then that's so there are too many bond connections with Faiz, and we just love Faiz. There's no mistake on that. So now tell me, do you see anybody who has been anywhere closer to the void that has been created by Faiz? There aren't any. You cannot replace some people. There is no way you can do it. But do you see people in their mold, any of the later generation in the Faiz mold? Because one more thing, when you were talking about Faiz and the romances of Faiz, that the love is for the country, which means the love is for the world. Country is only it's a demarcated area of geographical land. And if you remember that famous poem by which he wrote in 1971 during the Bangladesh crisis, Kaifi Azmi, I think there was a poem we read which said that "Me koi lakir nahi hu ki mita doge mujhe." I'm not just a line that you will, So, do you see any new generation people coming up in that anywhere in the world? Not just, I'm not talking about India per se, because now we have to look the world around, because you are into all this.
So I think that's a huge question. Given that's a question too big for me to answer. I mean, even when I read of all that's happening, when I read the latest poets and I listen to them, but I think that's a too big. Not only are the shoes too big to fill, but the question is also too big to answer. I'm not sure if I'm qualified enough to answer this. But what Faiz did, as I told you, not many are capable of doing that, because he wrote when when great poetry was being written in Urdu, and he to carve a niche in that space is difficult. I mean, it's almost next to impossible to to write when you are writing in a times when there are already such great poets and writing about figures. But not only to write like that, but also to change the direction of the traditional poetry that's being written. Right. So it's he in his poetry you never see the you know uh, you see a jadojahad, you see a seamless going from the traditional to modern, from the Qadim to the Jadid. You see that he still writes love poetry. So the love poetry, the tradition of Urdu love poetry has not changed. Just that the mashu has changed. So that's when he wrote the famous one, Mujhse Pehli Si Muhabbat. That's a love poem, right? But he says, he urges to the beloved, Mujhse Pehli Si Muhabbat, Mere Mehboob Nama. So the Mehboob is there, the Shair is there, the Muhabbat is still there, but it's unlike the earlier one. Pehli se nahi hai. मैंने समझा था कि तू है तो दरख्शां है हया, तेरा गम है तो गमे दहर का झगड़ा क्या है. Right? That if you are there, there's no other problem in the world that exists. But this is only that only I thought, मैंने समझा था तेरी आंखों के सिवा दुनिया में रखा क्या है. Right? That just your eyes. In tradition, you like the beloveds, of course, beauty is phenomenal. Nothing exists beyond that. Right? तेरी आंखों के सिवा दुनिया में रखा क्या है. तू जो मिल जाए तो तकदीर निगूं हो जाए. यूं ना था मैंने फकत चाहा था यूं हो जाए. That this was not the case, but I only wished, people. Right? And in this poem, you see the evolution of the poet as well. From what he understood as love, the all-encompassing, passionate love. Right? But then he says that no, there is weight of history. There are other things that I look around myself. And that's why towards the end he says, और भी दुख है ज़माने में मोहब्बत के सिवा, राहतें और भी हैं बस नहीं राहत के सिवा. Then he says that I only thought that if your eyes are there, the beauty of your eyes can surpass anything. But then he says, अनगिनत सदियों की तारीख बही मानतिल. Right? He talks of the oppressed, खाक में लथड़े हुए, खून में नहलाए हुए. That there are dead bodies, there are naked bodies, there are bodies of the oppressed. लौट जाती है उधर को भी नजर क्या कीजिए. That I cannot but look in that direction. लौट जाती है उधर को भी नजर क्या कीजिए. अब भी दिलकश है तेरा हुस्न, अब भी दिलकश है तेरा हुस्न, मगर क्या कीजिए. So it's a dialogue with he's talking to the beloved and says that you are beautiful, you are still young, you are still beautiful. But what do I do? Because there are other things in the world. There are other sides that I cannot unsee. And that's why, his poetry becomes progressive. As I said, it becomes seamless. There is no jerk there. There is no change in either tone or anything. I mean, it's not palpable. And he simply just replaces or expands, rather, the meaning of love. Love which is for one person, a woman, love in praise of beauty, but then also love for humanity, love for those who are oppressed, okay, a resistance towards them. So even, love that is all encompassing. And that's the beauty of it.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I've just got a comment here coming up, which I'll put it up just now. Sheila talks about the fact that in the Bengali literature, we had Nazrul Islam writing similar kind of inspiring poems on one hand and writing amazingly romantic poems on the other hand. And at the same time, Sanya, he has written a lot of religious poems, and those that religion, mind you, Nazrul Islams and Faizes of the world have no any particular religion. They belong to the humanity, the human race. So a lot of them have been written on Indian goddesses. He writes love. So there is a kind of a parallel that happened. Unfortunately, he, as you know, had gone. While we were talking, and I went off screen purposely, I did one thing. I hunted a small YouTube link on Faiz Saab reading a poem. So if you give me a minute, and if everybody, my audience gives us just 2 minutes, let me just fix it up and maybe we'll try and run that from the YouTube. So just give me a minute over here. I will try and play that. No, sorry, I think this is another one that's come up. Sania, I suggest you carry on with the discussion because I think I've lost that link. Let me find that link. I'll go off and search for it. Meanwhile, please continue your one question that I have for you at this point of time. Looking at the romantic affairs that you have been talking about, looking about the romantic affairs that we have been talking about, more romance, and even you rightly said, his rebellion or his poems of protest are also romance. So, it's not that he's just writing Inqilab Zindabad. There's a lot more to it. I mean, it's more. Even his Inqilab Zindabad is because he loves his Inqilab. I mean, like the revolution. So there is, it's all romance. You think he's some kind of a Sufi? I mean, like, he's somebody who is beyond all this, beyond the country, beyond religion, beyond geography, who is only talking about love. Who quotes Hafiz when he's accepting the Nehru Peace Prize? I mean,
So I don't know whether we can call him a Sufi or not, but Faiz, we have to think a lot before labeling him as Ramsar. But you can call him as a poet of love. That's as I told you, that's my introduction to Faiz. Whether it's the Sufiana love, it's the Ishq Majazi or the Sheikh Haqiqi, he just does Ishq, right? And I'm not sure whether I like to call him a Sufi or not, but a poet of love would be more appropriate, right? So Faiz would defy any kind of definites, right? Even in the poems that he had written, he would not really name. He would not really put any marker which can, make poem only rooted in that specific context or that specific time. That's why you can quote poet. That's why you can, sing Faiz on a tambourine, on a duff, on a guitar, on an orchestra, and on just on the simplest of instruments, or even without instrument. So to say that he wrote for a specific people, or he wrote for a specific country, or for a specific language would be not understanding Faiz at all. Because, as I told you, that even in his speech, in the acceptance speech of the Lenin Peace Prize, he said that it's only love that has, sort of given him not just courage, but, the reason to write poetry. And love
yeah,
as free from any flaw. And
that has
that's
been the reason of his existence. Yes. Okay, I've just got some on the YouTube, some random selections of Faiz Saab reciting mushairas, whatever. So let me just try and click and try and run. So please bear with me, my audience. I just want to show you something that hopefully I will be able to do that now.
Så går länge någon så blir jag förälskad. Då är det för sent. Så... Börja.
अभी कुछ महीने पहले हमने अपने स्टूडियो में एक मुशायरा आप लोगों के लिए रिकॉर्ड किया था.
Okay, you can hear that, Saneya? You can hear that. Okay, then let go ahead and play it.
हमारी खुशकिस्मती है कि उस मुशायरे में हमारे ख़ास मेहमान थे फैज़ अहमद फैज़. इस मुशायरे की सदारत कर रहे थे प्रोफेसर गोपी चंद नारंग, जिन्होंने फैज़ साहब का तारुफ कुछ इस तरह करवाया.
फैज़ साहब पर हम लोग इनकी शायरी पर जितना भी उर्दू नाज करें कम. यानी हमारी शेरी रिवायत, अभी मैं अर्ज कर ही रहा था, कि सदियों पुरानी और कैसी कैसी शख्सियतें और कैसी कैसी हस्तियां गुजरी हैं. एक से एक बड़ा शायर हमारी शेरी रिवायत में मौजूद है. लेकिन फैज़ साहब का कमाल ये है कि इन्होंने उर्दू शेरी, उर्दू शायरी की तख्लीकी रिवायत को एक बैनुल अक़वामी सतह. इनकलाबी शायर हैं फैज़ साहब, लेकिन इनका लहजा ग़िनाई, धीमा, नर्म, दिलावेज. इसमें एक ऐसी क़ुव्वत शिफा है इनकी आवाज में, जैसे कोई दिल के बहुत प्यार से दिल के रुखसार पर हाथ रखे. उन्होंने अपने असर के दर्द को, कर्ब को, अवाम की धड़कनों को, समाज के मसाइल को, और जो सियासी तकाजे हैं आज के फनकार से, उनको भी शायरी में समोया है. اور ان کا شعر درد محبت سے بھی چور ہے اور کلاسک کی روایت سے بھی رشتہ نہیں توڑ، اسے انحراف کیا ہے، معنیاتی سطح پر ایک نیا جہان معنی روشن کر دیا۔ ان کے ہاں ہر شعر میں، ہر نظم میں، غزل کی کے ایک ایک لفظ میں یعنی یوں معلوم ہوتا ہے کہ خیال کی پھلجھڑی روشن ہو گئی۔ بہرایا کلاسک کی جو ہماری قدیم روایت چلی آتی ہے، خدا سخن میر سے غالب اور بڑی ہستیاں انیس، نذیر، اقبال اور خود ہمارے عہد میں جوش تھے، تو یہ سارا کا سارا خون ان کے شعری وجود کا، شعری وجود میں، ان شعری وجود کی رگوں میں دوڑتا ہے، اور اپنے معنی سے، اپنے قیمتی تخلیقی تجربے سے انہوں نے اردو شاعری کی کائنات کو روشن کیا ہے۔ تو آج کی محفل ایک اعتبار سے ایسا آپ کے نام ہے۔
پورا مشاعرہ ہم اپنے کسی آگے کے پروگرام میں آپ کو دکھائیں گے، لیکن ابھی ہم آپ کو سنوا رہے ہیں فیض کا تاریخی کلام۔ تاریخی اس لیے کیونکہ فیض کی زندگی کا یہ آخری ٹیلی ویژن مشاعرہ تھا جس میں انہوں نے حصہ لیا۔
جیسے کہ دوستوں کو معلوم ہے، بہت گزشتہ 3-4 برس کارزار بیروت میں گزرے، اس کی یادگار ایک چھوٹی سی نظم ہے۔ وہاں پہ فلسطینی کیمپس میں جو بچے تھے، فلسطینی بچے کے لیے میں لوری لکھی کہ مت رو بچے، رو رو کے ابھی تیری امی کی آنکھ لگی ہے، مت رو بچے، رو رو کے ابھی تیری امی کی آنکھ لگی ہے، مت رو بچے، تیرے ابا نے کچھ ہی پہلے اپنے غم سے رخصت لی ہے، تیرے ابا نے کچھ ہی پہلے اپنے غم سے رخصت لی ہے، مت رو بچے، تیرا بھائی اپنے خواب کی تتلی پیچھے دور کہیں پردیس گیا ہے، تیرا بھائی اپنے خواب کی تتلی پیچھے دور کہیں پردیس گیا ہے، مت رو بچے، تیری باجی کا ڈولا پرائے دیس گیا ہے، مت رو بچے، تیرے آنگن میں مردہ سورج نہلا کے گئے ہیں، تیرے آنگن میں مردہ سورج نہلا کے گئے ہیں، چندرما دفنا کے گئے ہیں، مت رو بچے، تو گر روئے گا تو یہ سب امی، ابا، باجی، بھائی، چاند اور سورج اور بھی تجھ کو رلوائیں گے،
واہ 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 واہ،
مت رو بچے، تو گر روئے گا تو یہ سب امی، ابا، باجی، بھائی، چاند اور سورج اور بھی تجھ کو رلوائیں گے، مت رو بچے، تو مسکرائے گا تو شاید یہ سب ایک دن بیس بدل کر تجھ سے کھیلنے لوٹ آئے۔
واہ 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 واہ،
2-4 غزل کے شعر بھی سن لیجیے کہ دربار میں اب سطوت شاہی کی علامت، دربار میں اب سطوت شاہی کی علامت، دربار کا عصا ہے کہ مصنف کا قلم ہے، دربار کا عصا ہے کہ مصنف کا قلم ہے، پھر کوہ ندا پر آوارہ ہے، پھر کوہ ندا پر جو بشارت، پھر کوہ ندا پر جو بشارت، تمہید مسرت ہے کہ طول شب غم ہے، تمہید مسرت ہے کہ طول شب غم ہے، جس دجی کو گلیوں میں لیے پھرتے ہیں طفلاں، جس دجی کو گلیوں میں لیے پھرتے ہیں طفلاں، یہ میرا گریباں ہے کہ لشکر کا علم ہے، جس دجی کو گلیوں میں لیے پھرتے ہیں طفلاں، یہ میرا گریباں ہے کہ لشکر کا علم ہے، اور جس نور سے ہے شہر کی دیوار درخشاں، جس نور سے ہے شہر کی دیوار درخشاں، یہ خون شہیدہ ہے کہ خانہ جم ہے، یہ خون شہیدہ ہے کہ زرخانہ جم ہے۔ میرا آخری شعر ہے کہ حلقہ کیے بیٹھے رہو ایک شمع کو یارو، حلقہ کیے بیٹھے رہو ایک شمع کو یارو، کچھ روشنی باقی تو ہے پر چند کے کم ہے۔
Well, Sania,
it was such a surprise to see Narang Uncle like that. We've only seen him, and I had only seen him, towards a later stage in his life. In fact, this video that you have just played reminds, I mean, it's a very sweet reminder that Professor Gopi Chand Narang Uncle to me, Rekhta recently, I think before the pandemic, there was a session on Faiz, and my mother was the moderator, and she was talking to Gopi Chand Narang, just like Gopi Chand Narang had introduced Faiz Ahmed Faiz. Was my mother who had introduced Gopi Chand Narang because he has taken that place as a critic. But so about Faiz, usually people would not ask him to recite his own poem because he had a slightly Punjabi accent, specifically his love poems. But he would read them in his style, which was not really dramatic. But as you see, so he talks of love. So even when he talks of Matro Bacche, which is a hot trending poem, right? But after that, he talks of Darbar mein, Darbar, about Darbar, and you cannot take that love out of him. I think you also got the reference about when Professor Gopi Chand Narang said, "Kisi ne rukhsar pe haath rakha." That's from his poem Dashte Tanhai, in which he was alone in the cell when he was in prison, and he of course wrote this to Alice once ago. Dashte Tanhai is a love poem, Dashte Tanhai in the forest of loneliness.
This is really absolutely amazing. Even his choice of titles, his choice of words, and as rightly you said that it is whether he was uttering Urdu, but it was Punjabi, and that's the whole thing is this mix up of the two cultures that we have had and we have. I mean, that's something that you cannot cannot go away from that. So that's been there. Saneya, I wish we could. What more to discuss? I really don't know. But I think this is the first time I've really had my guest, and I did it consciously, let the guest take on, and I have done this thing of getting the YouTube and all that. And luckily, that was a wonderful clip. Narang Saab, he himself is a great Pandit. I mean, yeah, by all means. So.
And a last mushaira, that was Faiz's last mushaira. And I also got the sense that, instead of Adda, we have started, you have given the rein to me. I wish it were more like,
Yeah, we could go more. And this is because there is no end. There is no end when you're discussing Faiz Ahmed Faiz. So before I let you go today, I just want to tell my audience today that that this program will now be available on our website, which is there, www.kahanikancheti.in. Within the next, by tonight or tomorrow morning, you will have this whole thing uploaded there. So you can tell your friends who have missed out. And Saneya, you can also tell your friends. I'll also tell my friends and others who have missed out today, because today we have clashed. I mean, it didn't strike me earlier, but we have had a clash because there is Star TV running there. Tribute to Lata Mangeshkar today is also one of the episodes, and that starts at 7:00. So we may have lost out some audience over there, but no, it's okay. That's what it is. It is going to be there permanently on our website, so you can always go and listen to it. Please tell your friends likewise to do that. By tomorrow morning, it will be there. And Saneya, I want to get into a deal with you. The deal is like so. Whenever we are discussing these kind of subjects, when we are discussing Urdu poets, when we are discussing Manto Saab, Sadat Hussain Manto, when we are discussing Chuktai, Ismat Apa, and the whole lot, I'm sure Kahani Kancheti can lean on you. I'm actually extracting a promise from you. You're amazing. You're absolutely amazing.
Thank you. You're just kind. Zara nawazi ke liye shukriya. Definitely. I mean, I've had fun. I told you about my association with talkies, and I had fun today. I definitely had fun.
Super. That's the whole idea. Idea is to have fun, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad the audience also enjoyed it. And please stay in touch with our website, and you will be up. We'll be telling you what all things we are doing. The next one is any case on 16th of July. That date has been fixed, but there's something will come up. And thank you for joining the Kahani Kancheti family, Saneya. And I
Thank
hope
you.
to see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My
So as
pleasure.
Faiz would say, no, आइए हाथ उठाएं हम भी, हम
Ah,
जिन्हें रस्म दुआ याद नहीं, हम जिन्हें सोज़े मोहब्बत के सिवा कोई बुत कोई खुदा याद नहीं. So, raising my hands to Kahani Kancheti. And thank you, Sujit. Thank you.
thank you. Well, thank you very much for staying with us today, and we look forward to seeing you in our next such live Addas. Thank you.